My name is Irene Collins Batista. I'm 72 years old, and around here, folks call me the seamstress with steady hands and eyes that miss nothing. Not a stitch, and certainly not the truth. For decades, I've kept my modest little house in order. Even after my children grew up and started lives of their own, I always thought I knew every corner of this home, especially the bedroom of my youngest boy, which still holds his books, drawings, and memories as if he might walk through that door any minute. But that day, while cleaning more thoroughly than usual, I found something that knocked the air right out of me, a locked drawer. My son never kept secrets from me, or at least I thought he didn't. I pried it open with the tip of an old pair of scissors, my heart pounding. Inside was a simple faded blue folder with a single word scrawled in childish handwriting. Mom. I froze. When I opened it, I found letters, drawings, and torn notebook pages, memories my son had tucked away in. Silence for years. Each page held truths I never knew, or maybe ones I refused to see. Words swallowed in fear about his father's anger, the screams he heard at night, the days he saw me crying in the kitchen, thinking no one could hear. But he heard. He saw everything. We lived back then in a small town in rural Alabama, in a red brick house with cracked walls and thin windows, where life was tough, but I tried to keep it sweet. Baking on the weekends, music always playing on the radio, bedtime stories every night. I believed that love was enough, that my children were safe. But after my husband lost his job and became someone else, cold, bitter, unpredictable, the house began to fill with silence, and I stayed quiet, thinking I was protecting my boys. What I read in that folder changed everything. My son, still a child, had tried to protect me. He wrote letters he never gave me, drew pictures of escape plans, hid coins in the bottom of his backpack in case we needed to run. And I, so blinded by fear, never noticed the courage growing inside him. One day he wrote, "Mom, if you want to leave, I'll carry you." Today he lives far away. He's married now with kids of his own, and he still calls me every single week to ask how I'm doing. Now I understand why he always asks, why he never misses a call. I'm telling this story now because a mother's love isn't enough if it comes with silence. My son screamed for me without making a sound, and I only heard him. Decades later, I don't want other mothers to take that long to listen. The contents of that folder wounded me, but they also woke me up. In those childish doodles and unspoken words, I finally understood the weight of the love and the pain my son carried all by himself. If this story has touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me continue to share stories like this one. Where are you watching from? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Because the story I'm about to tell isn't easy, but it's real. It's mine, and it could be anyone's. Because behind every quiet mother there may be a child who's been screaming in silence. I grew up in a dusty corner of rural Alabama, in a town so small the church bell told us what time it was. Our house was humble, red brick on the outside, with a little porch where Mama kept potted violets and a wooden swing that creaked with every breeze. My childhood smelled like cornbread and soap, and sounded like old country songs crackling from the kitchen radio. We didn't have much money, but we had laughter. We had rhythm, or so I believed. My parents were hard-working people. Mama did alterations and sewing for the neighbors. Maybe that's where I got it from. And Daddy used to drive delivery trucks for a hardware supplier. When he was home, he'd sit us around the table and tell stories about the towns he'd seen and the folks he'd met. Sometimes he brought back treats from roadside diners. Hard. Candy, a jar of local honey, even a harmonica once. I had 2 siblings, my big sister Louise and my baby brother Michael. The 3 of us were inseparable. Thick as thieves, always barefoot, always running somewhere. Our mornings started early, with the smell of coffee and biscuits from the kitchen. Mama would wake us gently, brushing our hair and tucking our shirts just right. Breakfast was usually simple. Grits with butter, maybe a slice of bacon if we were lucky. Then we'd walk to school, through red dirt roads and fields full of cotton and corn. I remember how the humidity clung to our skin in the summer, how our shoes got caked in mud when it rained. But school was a place of wonder for me. I loved learning, loved the sound of chalk on the board, the smell of books older than we were. After school, we came home to Mama cooking supper, beans, cornbread, sometimes fried okra or meatloaf if we'd had a good week. She moved around the kitchen like she was dancing, singing under her breath. I'd help set the table or snap green beans, while Louise read on the porch and Michael colored in the living room. It felt safe, like the world couldn't touch us inside those walls. At bedtime, we shared stories, mine made up, Louise's serious, Michael's silly, and Mama always kissed us goodnight like she meant it. Sundays were special. We dressed in our best for church, even if our shoes were scuffed and our collars a bit crooked. After the sermon, we'd eat cold fried chicken under the oak trees, and Daddy would stretch out on a quilt, telling stories while chewing a toothpick. On those days, he was soft, playful, the Daddy I wanted to remember. Louise would hum gospel songs. I'd braid wildflowers into Michael's hair, and we'd laugh like the world had no shadows. Neighbors used to say we looked like a picture-perfect family. I believed them, because all I saw were the good parts. Mama's touch, Daddy's stories, the way the light looked coming through the kitchen window. At night, we'd bundle together in bed, giggling under the covers, whispering secrets until we fell asleep. Mama would shush us from the doorway, but she never sounded mad, just tired and loving. I was a good student, loved to write, draw, read. My teacher, Mrs. Harrison, said I had a wild imagination and a soft heart. She let me borrow books from the school's locked cabinet, the ones with worn covers and grown-up ideas. My favorite stories were always about brave girls who ran away from castles or found secret doorways into other worlds. I didn't know it then, but maybe I was already dreaming of escape. Daddy didn't yell much. He wasn't the kind of man who shouted. When he was upset, he just got quiet. Real quiet. That kind of quiet that makes you nervous. Mama would tell us he was just tired from work. He's been on the road all week, she'd whisper, handing him a beer. I never questioned it. Adults were strange and moody and complicated, but I trusted them. I trusted her. Summertime was magical. Fireflies, popsicles, tire swings. The older cousins came down from Atlanta, and the house overflowed with noise. We'd chase each other barefoot through the fields, build forts out of blankets, stay up late eating boiled peanuts. Mama made sure we had clean clothes, fresh sheets, and something sweet at the end of every day. I thought that was love, and maybe it was. Maybe it was the kind she knew how to give. We had a big pecan tree out back. Michael and I would climb it every afternoon, throwing nuts down for Louise to catch. From the top branch, I could see the whole town, the schoolhouse, the gas station, the church. Everything looked smaller from up there, easier to understand. That's how I felt when I read too, like I was outside my life, just for a while. My spot in the house was the window in the hallway, the one with the view of the cotton fields. I'd sit there with a notebook, watching the wind move through the stalks like waves. Sometimes I wrote poems. Other times I just watched. I liked to imagine I could see all the way to another life, one where everything was bright, simple, safe. But back then, I thought I already had that. Louise was like a second mama, bossy, protective, always brushing Michael's hair or fixing my collar. She'd make up songs, tutor us in math, and kiss us on the head when we were scared. Michael was pure joy. Big brown eyes, quick to giggle, always asking questions. He once told me he was going to build me a house when he grew up, one with a big kitchen just for my stories. I laughed, but a part of me believed him. Daddy got home from work just before supper. We'd run to meet him, clinging to his legs like puppies. He'd tell us about funny folks he met, strange weather he'd driven through, sometimes a joke we didn't understand, but laughed at anyway. Once, he brought home a battery-powered radio. Mama nearly cried, not out of surprise, but because it meant music, even on quiet days. That radio became a lifeline. Mama was the glue, no doubt about it. Strong hands, soft voice, back straight even when the world bent her. She could calm Daddy, soothe us, stretch $1 into dinner. She never complained. If she was upset, she'd hum while washing dishes, as if turning her sorrow into something softer. I wanted to be like her, graceful, strong, unbreakable. I didn't yet know what it cost her to seem that way. Summer days felt endless, hot, loud, sticky. We'd take naps on the floor, play until sunset, fall asleep before our heads hit the pillow. We didn't have much, but we never felt poor. Mama made homemade lemonade and froze it in little cups. That sweetness was everything. Looking back, it was a childhood full of love. And maybe that's what made the fall so hard. Michael was observant, always watching. One day he looked at Daddy and said, "He's not happy anymore." I told him it was just work stress, that Daddy needed rest. But Michael wasn't convinced. He looked at Daddy like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. I see now. He was starting to notice the cracks before any of us did. I still remember the smell of Mama's biscuits on Saturday mornings, the way she smoothed our hair before school. Those little things got etched in my memory like carvings on a tree. It was a childhood marked by simplicity and by the deep, quiet kind of love that makes you believe nothing bad could ever happen. I was 12 the summer everything started to unravel. It hadn't rained in weeks, and the heat pressed down like a punishment. The air smelled like dust and old wood, and even the trees looked tired. One afternoon, Daddy came home early. He didn't say a word, just dropped his keys on the counter and stared at the wall. When Mama asked if everything was okay, he shook his head once. That night at dinner, we barely touched our food. The silence at the table felt heavy, like something sacred had been broken. A few days later, we found out he'd lost his job, the company he'd been, driving for cut routes, and just like that, after 20 years he was out. No warning, no thank you, just gone. Mama tried to comfort him, fixed his favorite meal, poured him sweet tea in the chipped glass he liked. He barely looked up, said he was tired, went to bed without a word. That was the beginning of it, the beginning of the quiet that spoke louder than any scream. At first we all thought it was temporary. He'd find something new, we'd be okay. But weeks passed and Daddy started changing. He stopped shaving, stopped talking, started drinking more. He'd sit on the porch for hours, not watching anything, just staring. Mama kept up appearances, cooked, cleaned, hummed her little songs. But there was something strained in her smile, like it was being held together with safety pins. One day, she brought home a box of cheap fabric and said she'd picked up more sewing work. "Just until things get better," she said. I nodded, even though I could see the worry in her eyes. At night, I'd sit with her as she stitched by the yellow light of the kitchen lamp. I'd thread needles, press seams. We didn't talk much, but I think we both found comfort in the rhythm of the work. Like maybe if we just kept moving, the house wouldn't fall apart. Daddy started sleeping during the day and staying up at night. He stopped going to church, stopped asking about school. When he did speak, it was sharp, cold. The kind of cold that gets under your skin and stays there. I remember one night Michael spilled milk at dinner. It was an accident. His hand just slipped. Daddy slammed his hand on the table so hard the dishes jumped. "Can't y'all do anything right?" he barked. We froze. Mama rushed to clean it up, her hands shaking. Sunday dinners stopped. No more fried chicken, no more quilts in the yard, no more jokes. Just a man who sulked in the dark while the rest of us tiptoed around like ghosts. I tried to pretend things were fine. I still read my books, wrote my little stories, but the words didn't come as easy. It was hard to imagine magical worlds when the real one was so heavy. One night I heard Mama and Daddy arguing in the kitchen. Their voices were low but tight with pain. "The kids can't live like this," she said. "We need help." He said something I'll never repeat. Something cruel, something that made her cry right there, openly. I wanted to go to her, but I was too scared. I just laid in bed, gripping the blanket, wishing myself invisible. Michael started wetting the bed. Mama said it was normal, just a phase, but I knew it wasn't. He was scared, we all were. Louise stopped playing the piano. I stopped drawing. Our house, once full of music and stories, had become a place of whispers and broken routines. We didn't talk about it. We didn't even look each other in the eye for long. It was like we were all trying to survive in the same sinking boat. That was the new normal. Quiet fear, careful steps, watching the door, listening for footsteps. I still wanted to believe we were okay, still wanted to believe that love was enough. But in my heart, I knew. Something had shifted, something big, something that wouldn't go back to how it was. At first it was like a slow fog creeping in. Daddy, once full of stories and laughter, became a shadow that hung over every room. He wasn't loud, not at first, but his presence filled the house like smoke. You didn't have to see the fire to feel it burning. Everything we did, every laugh, every question, every clumsy mistake, felt like it could light the match. So we learned to go quiet, to tiptoe, to disappear when he entered the room. He began taking control of everything. What time we ate, how long the lights could stay on, what we could watch on TV, if we watched anything at all. He criticized Mama's cooking, our clothes, even how Michael tied his shoes. Nothing was good enough. Mama tried to smooth things over to keep things calm, but her voice grew softer, more careful. Louise and I started doing our chores before being asked, just to avoid the lectures. Michael followed us everywhere. He didn't feel safe unless he could see one of us. One afternoon, Michael left his toy truck in the hallway. Daddy stepped on it and lost his mind. He yanked Michael up by the arm so fast the boy screamed. "Are you stupid?" he shouted. Mama ran in, tried to pull them apart, but he pushed her back. That was the first time I saw her scared. Not worried, not tired, scared. Her hands trembled as she pulled Michael into her arms. That night, we all slept in the same room. No one spoke. No one slept. The first signs of abuse weren't punches. They were words, eyes, a chair kicked out from under the table, a slammed door, a finger pointed too close to the face. I began to track him. The tone of his voice, the smell of whiskey on his breath, the tightness in his jaw. I knew when it was coming. We all did. Mama tried to pretend, to keep things normal, but we were way past that. One night, Michael broke a glass. Daddy didn't even yell. He just stood up, walked over, and shoved him into the wall. It wasn't hard enough to hurt him bad, but it was enough to freeze me, enough to wake up something primal. Mama finally stood up to him that night, blocking him from getting to Michael again. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice shaking. He cursed her, stormed out the door, didn't come back for hours. We didn't wait for him. We curled up on the living room floor together and locked the front door. I became the protector. I didn't ask to be, but someone had to. I watched Michael like a hawk. I distracted him with coloring books, stories, anything to keep him away from Daddy's temper. Louise kept her head down. Mama worked until her fingers ached. But none of us could stop it. None of us could fix it. So I stayed alert, like a soldier, always listening. Louise withdrew. She stopped eating much. She got quiet. She read all the time, thick books about people far away. I think she was building her own escape plan, one that didn't require a front door. Michael started drawing again, too. But this time, it was pictures of cages, of homes with escape hatches, of bridges over lava. One day I found a drawing that said, "This tunnel leads to safety." He drew himself, holding my hand. That drawing nearly broke me. The fear came in different shapes. Some days it was the sound of boots on the porch. Others, it was the silence after a slammed door. We didn't know which was worse. He didn't have to hit us to hurt us. His power was in the waiting, the unpredictability. I stopped feeling like a kid. I became a watchdog, a shadow of Mama. We started lying, a lot. I fell off my bike. I tripped over my shoe. We're just tired. No one asked too many questions. Not the neighbors, not the teachers. People don't like looking at pain they can't fix. So we became invisible, hidden behind politeness and Sunday dresses. One day I saw a bruise on Mama's arm. She said, "It was from bumping into the cabinet." But I saw the way she tucked her sleeve down, the way she avoided my eyes. I didn't push her. I just nodded. We both knew. The truth sat heavy between us, unsaid but undeniable. He called it discipline, said we were lazy, spoiled, that we didn't know how good we had it. When he got like that, it wasn't even about us. It was like he needed to feel bigger, scarier, like making us small gave him something back. That was the worst part, watching him become someone we didn't recognize. Michael's drawings got darker, houses on fire, men with no faces, stick figures with broken hearts. I started hiding them. I didn't want Daddy to find them. Didn't want him to see that Michael knew. One night, I found a page that said, "One day, I'll be big enough to save her." He drew me with wings. Fear became normal, the background noise. I got used to waking up tense, listening for footsteps. Mama's back started hurting from stress. Louise stopped brushing her hair. I wore the same oversized sweater for a week because it made me feel invisible. That became the goal. Don't be noticed. Stay safe. Then he shoved Louise. It wasn't hard, but it was enough. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the same thing I felt. This was getting worse. I screamed at him to stop. He turned, called me a name I'll never forget, and shoved me too. Not hard, but with that same coldness, that same, "You mean nothing," look. That night, I held Louise and Michael close and promised them I'd get us out, somehow. The line between mind games and real danger had disappeared. Mama still said we had to be patient. He's just going through something. But I didn't believe her anymore. Not because I thought she was lying, but because I knew she was just as scared as we were. That night I found Michael sleeping in the closet. He said he felt safe there. I didn't question it. I curled up beside him and held him close. I whispered, "Me too." We didn't sleep, just laid there, listening to the quiet, waiting for the next crack in the floorboards, for something, anything, to change. Mama started waking up earlier than ever, sometimes before the sun had even touched the kitchen window. I'd find her already dressed, moving around the house in silence, folding laundry that didn't need folding, wiping counters that were already clean. It was like she believed if she kept busy enough, the fear wouldn't catch her. I followed her lead, became her shadow. If she scrubbed, I dried. If she sewed, I sorted thread. If she stayed quiet, so did I. Our days became a quiet routine of survival. No sudden moves, no raised voices. We learned to read the mood in the room before stepping into it. Michael barely spoke above a whisper. He used gestures, looks, the gentle tug of a shirt sleeve to get our attention. Louise buried herself in her books. I started noticing how she flinched at loud noises, how her hands would tremble when she turned a page. We all coped in our own way. Me, I just stopped feeling. I quit drawing, quit writing, quit laughing. I wore the same gray sweater every day, even in the heat. Something about hiding made me feel less exposed. I tied my hair back tight, stopped looking in the mirror. The girl I saw there reminded me of who I used to be, and that hurt more than anything. At school I pretended, smiled when I had to, nodded like I was listening, but I was always somewhere else in my mind, somewhere quiet. The shouting became a regular part of our evenings. Dinner was a minefield. If Michael spilled water, if Louise didn't pass the salt fast enough, if Mama set his plate down with the wrong expression, boom, a chair slammed back, a fist on the table, harsh words flung like knives. Afterward, the silence was worse, a suffocating silence, filled with tension we weren't allowed to name. We'd go to bed with knots in our stomachs. Nobody said goodnight anymore. The bruises started showing up more. Mama had one on her shoulder that she said came from lifting boxes. Another on her thigh she blamed on a slip in the garden. But her eyes told the truth. I never asked. I just stayed close to her, helped more. When she didn't have the strength to hum while she worked, I hummed for her. When she dropped a plate, I swept the pieces before she could bend down. Michael stopped sleeping in his bed. He started curling up in corners, under the table, behind the couch, sometimes even inside the linen closet. said it felt safer. I let him. I gave him my favorite blanket and kissed the top of his head like Mama used to do. Told him we were brave, that I was with him. But I couldn't lie and say everything would be okay, not when I didn't believe it myself. Sleep became a luxury. I'd lie awake for hours listening. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. Every deep sigh from the living room made my stomach twist. Some nights, I held a shoe in my hand while I slept, not because I thought I could use it, but because it felt like holding something, anything, something I controlled. Food got scarce. Mama stretched rice and beans into meals that shouldn't have fed 5 people but somehow did. We stopped asking for seconds. Michael and I started pretending we weren't hungry, pushing food around on our plates so she'd eat more. We drank water to feel full. I started hiding crackers in my backpack just in case. My body started to feel strange, not just tired, aching. My back hurt. My head throbbed. I felt dizzy some mornings, like I'd been holding my breath all night. At school, the nurse asked if I was okay. Mama told them I was growing fast, that I just needed more rest. But it wasn't my body breaking down. It was everything else. We stopped making eye contact. At home, I'd catch Louise staring blankly out the window, her lips moving like she was reciting something silently. Michael stopped drawing. Mama stopped singing. I kept my mouth shut, always shut, because if we didn't talk about it, maybe it would stay small. Maybe it wouldn't grow into something bigger. But silence is a liar. It always grows. I started writing again. Not stories, not poems, just thoughts, memories, fears. I wrote them in tiny handwriting on scraps of paper and hid them in a jar buried behind the shed. It felt like talking to someone, like a version of myself who might survive this and look back one day. A version who could say, I made it. School stopped feeling like a safe place. I began to notice the way people looked at us, the way teachers hesitated before asking questions. One of them, Miss Carter, pulled me aside once, said, You know you can talk to me. I smiled and nodded, but I didn't say a word. Because what would I even say? That our house felt like a loaded gun? That we were all just waiting for the next explosion? One afternoon, I saw Daddy standing on the porch when I walked home. Just standing, smoking, watching. I froze, couldn't breathe. I forced myself to walk past him, into the house, without running. Mama was in the kitchen trying to pretend it was a normal day, but I could see it in her hands, the shaking, the way she kept wiping the same spot on the counter. I started avoiding mirrors. My reflection scared me, not because of how I looked, but because I didn't recognize the girl staring back. Her eyes were too old, her shoulders too tense. I missed the girl who believed in stories, who danced in the kitchen, who laughed with her brother until they couldn't breathe. One night, Mama dropped a jar in the pantry, glass everywhere. I helped her pick it up. When I reached for a shard, I saw her tears falling silently onto the floor. She didn't sob, didn't speak, just cried. I wrapped my arms around her and held her like I used to hold Michael. That's when I realized she wasn't just my mother. She was a child in a grown woman's body, trying to survive too. Michael stopped drawing altogether, said he didn't know what to draw, that everything he saw in his mind was dark. I gave him a blank notebook, told him he could draw anything, that no one would see it. He said maybe later, maybe when it didn't hurt so much to imagine. The house began to crack. The walls had little splits in the plaster. The roof started leaking when it rained. But the worst cracks were the ones in our hearts, the ones no one could fix with nails or caulk. Mama tried. She lit candles, cleaned obsessively, baked when she could. But even fresh bread couldn't hide the rot underneath. One night, Daddy didn't come home. We ate without him, sat in the living room afterward, reading, laughing softly. Michael fell asleep with his head on Mama's lap. For the first time in months, the house felt almost peaceful. Then he came back, drunk, dirty, angry. He slammed the door, didn't say a word, and passed out on the couch. That's when I knew. His absence hurt less than his presence, and that terrified me more than anything. Sometimes resistance doesn't come with fists or shouting. Sometimes it starts in silence, a decision made deep in your chest to stop shrinking. My first act of defiance was small, almost nothing. I stopped lowering my eyes when he walked into the room. Just that. I kept my chin up. I felt like I was staring down a tornado with a paper umbrella. But that moment, it changed something inside me. A whisper that said, "You're still here." Louise began staying after school, talking more to Miss Carter. Not in full confessions. We didn't dare. But she asked questions, careful ones. "What do you do if someone at home cries a lot? Is it wrong to want to leave?" Miss Carter didn't press. But one day she gave Louise a slip of paper with her home number on it and said, "For emergencies." Louise folded it into her shoe. That paper might as well have been a lifeline. Michael started drawing again. Not people this time, but plans, escape routes, maps of imaginary towns where we all had our own rooms and Daddy wasn't there. He drew keys, ladders, tunnels under our house. "This one," he whispered once, "is for when we leave." He wasn't just drawing anymore. He was preparing. We all were, in our own ways. Mama stayed quiet, but one evening after Daddy passed out on the couch, she pulled me into the laundry room and handed me an envelope filled with crumpled bills and change. "Keep this hidden," she said, "just in case." She didn't explain. She didn't have to. That envelope was her way of saying, "I see what's happening. I'm trying." I buried it under a loose floorboard in our room. Every night I'd check to make sure it was still there. I began watching him, not with fear, but with focus. I learned his rhythms, when he drank more, when he was less aware, what words set him off. I became a student of danger. I tracked his cigarette count, the level of liquor in his bottle, how loud his boots sounded when he walked. This wasn't paranoia. It was survival. I used that knowledge to protect my siblings, to time our movements like we were in enemy territory. Miss Carter gave me a notebook. "To write down the things you can't say out loud," she told me. I wrote in it every day. Not just pain, plans, possibilities, questions. I hid it in a grocery bag beneath my mattress. That notebook gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thinking ahead. At home, I became quieter, but more grounded. I cleaned with more intention, stood taller. When Daddy threw out one of Michael's drawings, I didn't cry. I just looked him in the eye and picked it up from the trash like it was sacred. He didn't say a word, just walked away. That was the moment I knew. Fear only works if you let it swallow you. And I was done being swallowed. The night everything shifted didn't come with a warning. It wasn't stormy or loud. It was a still, muggy summer evening, the kind where the air feels too thick to breathe. Supper was quiet. We were eating beans and rice again, and trying to finish before Daddy got into one of his moods. Mama looked pale. Louise stared at her plate. Michael had barely touched his food. I was halfway through mine when Daddy slammed his fork down and snapped something about wasting money on brats who don't appreciate anything. Mama opened her mouth to respond, not to argue, just to soothe. But something in his face changed. His voice rose. "I work my ass off, and this is the respect I get?" I couldn't help it. I said, "You haven't worked in over a year." I didn't plan it. The words just left my mouth like a match tossed into gasoline. He stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. Mama jumped between us, begging him to calm down. He shoved her. Not hard, but enough to make her stumble. Michael screamed. Louise dropped her fork. I felt something rise inside me. Not fear, not rage. Something sharp, clear. I stepped in front of Mama, held out my arms and said, "That's enough." My voice didn't even shake. He stared at me like I was something new, something he didn't know how to handle. "You think you're in charge now?" he sneered. "You think you can stop me?" I didn't answer, just stood there. For the first time, I didn't move. He raised his hand like he was going to hit me. I didn't flinch. That's when Louise moved. She grabbed Michael and the envelope of money from behind the clock on the mantel. I nodded. It was time. Mama didn't argue. She didn't ask where we were going. She just grabbed her purse and the keys. We left the house barefoot in the dark, hearts pounding. We walked down the long dirt road, the crickets screaming around us. Michael kept looking over his shoulder. Is he coming? I told him no. Even though I didn't know, we just kept walking. We ended up at Miss Carter's house. It was the only place I could think of. I knocked hard, not caring about the time. When she opened the door and saw us, 4 shadows in the night, shaking, barefoot, and scared, she didn't ask a single question. She let us in, wrapped Mama in a blanket, sat Michael on the couch with a glass of milk, put Louise in her guest bed, took my hand and held it like it was the most fragile thing in the world. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with my knees tucked under me, watching the road, waiting for headlights. They never came. I kept one hand on the envelope Mama had trusted me with. The other clutched the notebook Miss Carter had given me. I didn't feel brave. I felt broken. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years, free. A lot happened after that night, things I'm still unpacking. Miss Carter helped us get in touch with Mama's cousin in Nashville. Within a week, we were gone. No goodbyes, no explanations, just a borrowed car, some grocery bags filled with clothes, and 4 fragile hearts trying to hold each other together. Daddy looked for us, for a while, called around, even showed up at Miss Carter's once, but she stood firm, filed a report. The law stepped in, and that chapter, as heavy and long as it was, finally began to close. Mama took time to heal. Years, really. But little by little, I saw her shoulders relax. I heard her humming again, quiet at first, then stronger. She got a job at a local fabric store, started making quilts. Louise became a nurse. Michael started painting. Real painting. The kind that hangs in galleries now. And me? I kept writing. Every word I had buried in jars, scribbled in notebooks, whispered into the dark, they came back to me, and I wrote them all down. The fear never fully left. Sometimes it showed up in dreams, in the creak of old floorboards, in sudden anger that made me flinch. But now I knew how to breathe through it, to name it, to survive it. I realized my strength wasn't in the moment I yelled or ran. It was in all the times I didn't give up, in the way I held my brother, in the way I stayed standing. Now, in this quiet house, surrounded by fabric scraps and family photos, I feel peace in ways I never thought possible. My youngest son, the one who used to leave little folded notes in my pocket, calls me every Sunday. He always asks, "You doing okay, Mama?" And now, finally, I can answer him honestly. I'm more than okay. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps these stories find the people who need them most. And tell me, what did you feel while listening? I truly want to know.